Hi, welcome to the 2024 edition of Dharma Conversations. With this, we are starting a series of conversations with the eminent scholar Sandeep Balakrishna, a renowned public intellectual who researches and writes extensively and regularly on culture, history, and civilization, and often juxtaposes that in the context of contemporary subjects. So, today in this episode, we will be talking about certain tendencies that this part of India, south of India, has started to exhibit openly in terms of utterances, and there seems to be a pattern emerging. And what does it entail in terms of its impact across the national polity? What are its roots, and where does this take the country ahead in the coming years? With that, let's start the conversation. Hi, Sandeep. Let's start the first episode of Dharma Conversations. Like I mentioned, we are witnessing a series of utterances from this part of the world. They were confined largely to Tamil Nadu over the years, and now we've recently seen a statement by an elected representative of the Congress party in Karnataka, who also happens to be the brother of the Deputy Chief Minister. When the tax devolution was announced in the interim budget, the statement made was it's time that Karnataka secedes from the rest of India and runs its own ship. And later it was, the attempt was to clarify that it was a statement made in anger. So we've seen such statements come in different contexts from the state of Tamil Nadu, a dharmic state to the core. Is there a pattern you see in these statements, or these are off-the-cuff statements actually as a reaction to some episodes that are happening in the country, or is there more to it? How do you see these?
Yeah, thanks, Parag, for that. Setting the context in this fashion, there are several threads in this. This statement by an elected representative, Mr. D.K. Suresh, he's an MP, by the way. So, what he basically said can be interpreted in three or four ways. The first is obviously it was an explosion of anger or outrage, if you will, at what he calls as injustice to Karnataka, because the center is not giving enough funds to this state and things like that, federalism, all those nice things, but that is just on the surface. One major thread, and this is nothing new, what Mr. Suresh said about some kind of injustice that Modi government is doing to Karnataka, this narrative is nothing new. Way back during NDA 1, when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, a similar kind of a narrative was floated in Karnataka, because during that period, the Chief Minister of Karnataka again was from Congress party, Mr. S.M. Krishna. The same kind of narrative was being pumped even during that period about some kind of stepmotherly treatment, not enough resources is being given by the center. So this is par for the course. But what has changed since S.M. Krishna's time to now is the manner in which the Congress has completely lost power in the center for two successive terms, apart from a string of electoral losses even in the states. So that is one background. And in the specific context of Mr. Suresh, the present becomes very important. Remember the promises on the back of which the Congress party rode to power in the elections of last year in Karnataka. It got a handsome majority, 136 seats. The promises, apart from all this Muslim vote consolidation, we'll set that aside, was these freebies, reckless promises, and that has pretty much bankrupted the treasury out here. There are not even murmurs, but there are loud noises coming from within the Congress party MLAs and sitting ministers that this model can't be sustained. This kind of freebie culture cannot be sustained. Free tickets to women across the state, this kind of thing. Free power. At some point, like Margaret Thatcher said, right, about socialism, the problem with socialism is that at some point you will run out of other people's money.
So well said. So well said. I mean.
So this is what is happening. So the state exchequer is pretty much on the verge of bankruptcy. One. So this is, and why does DK Suresh, he says we are having a lot of injustice is being done by Modi government, assuming that Modi government heeds his fake outrage and releases more money to Karnataka. How will it be spent? Where will it go? It will once again go to fund the same freebies, which is bankrupted the state. So this is like a bottomless pit.
So one, it is an attempt to deflect the blame to the central government because of their inability to fund the reckless freebies.
Yes.
But while the tempered outrage could have stayed true to that part, that there was bias in the tax devolution, but the call for seceding from the rest of the country does beg the question that how has Karnataka, somebody from Karnataka started to make these statements, even if he happens to be from the Congress party?
Yeah, this is an excellent question actually, and you had asked this, but you have provided greater clarity now. This whole bit about seceding from India, unless you give us the paraphrase statement of Suresh, is that there is injustice about devolution of tax money to Karnataka. You give it to us, otherwise we will form a separate South Indian country. This is
exactly
almost in those words,
yes.
Not verbatim, but that is the import. Now this narrative, I call this as the Dravidification of Karnataka politics. Now this has a long history, and when you set the context initially, you mentioned that such calls for separatist calls for a separate Tamil country, separate Dravida Nadu, it originated in Tamil Nadu. It has a history of more than a century. We'll come to that later in the discussion. Now that narrative was never part of Karnataka politics until now. Why this Dravidification and how it has happened has a very, very simple reason. When you look at Indian politics and the whole national scenario ever since Mr. Modi came to power 10 years back. Like I said, serial electoral losses for the Congress party, both at the center and the state level. This has put a lot of pressure. It has not only upset the apple cart, Congress party and the rest of non-BJP formations, the so-called secular formations, Congress clones essentially. They are all faced, including Congress, they are all facing an existential crisis. How do you revive this party with a leader like Rahul Gandhi? Assuming, you give the hallowed name of leader to someone like Rahul Gandhi. So it is left to these individual states and, strong men in individual states in the Congress party to somehow kind of hold the ship together. A big state was lost recently, Rajasthan. Madhya Pradesh, they thought they were coming back, flop. Chhattisgarh was a surprise bomb. Nobody expected, Congress did not expect the BJP to do so well and snatch the state away from them. So what do they have left here? Essentially Karnataka. So that is one thing on the political side. Now coming to this so-called separate South Indian country, this Dravidification has slowly infiltrated Karnataka roughly after 2018, if I'm not mistaken, which is when a pseudo-academic sounding paper was written. It was published in a Naxal outfit called, online magazine called The News Minute. Most of us are familiar. So the heading of that article said, "Is it time for a United States of South India?" Something like that.
So it was actively propounded as a theory.
Yeah. So that So that is the origin of this narrative, this Dravidification of Karnataka politics, that paper. That is one. And number two, all the language wars which had occurred, especially between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, about Kannada and Tamil pride and Kaveri water sharing, that is all past. I mean, those hostilities might exist at a very, very low level now. I mean, it's not even significant. What has become significant on the political level is that both these states, on the one hand, you have what you call the relics of the Dravidian ideology. Even the DMK doesn't actively believe in something called a Dravidian ideology. It is only about money, power and survival and existence. That's what the DMK has been reduced to. Let's be under no illusion. Be it Stalin or his son Udayanidhi, they have no idea to talk at length about the foundation of Dravidian ideology. At best, they will, give out second-hand quotations from E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar and people of that generation. They can't talk, coherently about the Dravidian theory. Ask them to sit down and write a proper paper on Dravidianism. They'll be unable to do this. Udayanidhi or his father Stalin. So that ended. So they want their monopolistic hold over power and money and everything it brings them. So what is the next thing? So what has happened in the last 8 or 10 years is that all non-BJP forces, especially in South India, they have been taken over, almost taken over by the far left. The global forces of the far left, including the familiar usual suspects from the Islamic and the evangelist bloc. And they have recast the whole narrative as, justice for Dalits and anti-Brahminism and anti-upper caste. That has made a reverse door entry in a different way, but in a more sinister way, because these forces have acquired global power and their base has now become South India.
So you made some very worrying revelations in terms of the nexus of forces that is at play behind the scenes, resulting in these fissiparous tendencies.
Yeah.
So I'd just like you to elaborate on a few of them separately. So let's say take Tamil Nadu. There is a history of the Dravidian movement,
yes,
as questionable as the origins and the provocations may have been, and somehow while every utterance is sad, one kind of expects that from that ideology. But then coming to your home state, which has a far more refined existence for all these years, all these decades, for this Dravidianism, as you call it, to take root in this state. How do you see this development? Is it a passing phase? Is there a connection you see to the Congress party, or is it there's something more to it? I mean, I still am not able to understand. Is it an intemperate statement, or there is more? And is there a correlation to the roots of the Congress as well?
Yeah, actually, now that you frame it like that, very interesting, by the way. As far as D.K. Suresh's statement of a separate South Indian nation is concerned, that can be viewed as an intemperate statement, but the fact that he made it shows that he made it on the foundation of something which was already fit to him, which already exists. So what is that thing? It is the same thing which I mentioned, the United States of South India. So that narrative has been fed at all levels in non-BJP or non-Hindu. I'll say that. In non-BJP or non-Hindu formations or anti-Hindu formations, political outfits. So this is a script that has been given to these guys, including Congress. You look at who all speaks the separatist language, Parag. Today, Congress, Jairam Ramesh, just 2 days back, 2 or 3 days back, he was talking about the so-called farmer protest and saying, अलग-अलग देशों से सभी दिल्ली आ रहे हैं.
Yes,
See
yes.
where all this goes. See the implications and
It has been noticed widely.
And the spread of this narrative. So here they call it United States of South India. But on the larger canvas, on the national canvas, they say alag alag desh. So what do you mean Punjab alag desh hai? Haryana is a different country. Delhi is a different country. And where does this feed into? It feeds back, remember what Rahul Gandhi said about India is not one country.
Yeah.
It is what is that? Federation of states.
Federation of
like
states.
that. So basically this is a breaking India narrative. And these people have, depending on the mood, depending on the occasion, depending on the climate, depending on the given situation, they are playing out and they are uttering this breaking India narrative at all levels.
So since, like you called out a little earlier, since their repeated rejection at the hustings, particularly at the center, and them having no merit or capability to fight politically with an agenda of their own, so the idea is now to fragment the country so that they can retain their pockets of power while, in a sense, weakening the center. I mean, is that the motive behind it? Is that the hope, rather?
Loosely speaking, yes. Loosely speaking, yes. Because the so-called India alliance and the botched UPA alliance that came together, some 24 parties came together, in 2019. Put together, assuming they win 100% of their seats throughout India, this India alliance, they won't cross 150 seats. Alright, so like I said, it boils down to the same thing. All these so-called regional parties, regional power centers, they are fighting. It is a struggle. It is a desperate battle for survival. There is no national party in the true sense apart from the BJP, from its narrative. Now, among all these, I'm glad you brought this question. Among all the political parties in India, show me one party which talks about India as a whole, as a sovereign, united sovereign democratic republic. Show me one party. The only alleged national party apart from the Bharatiya Janata Party is a Congress. What language is it speaking, sir? Federation of states, separate South India, separate, whatever, country of South India, separate Dravidistan. So who speaks for all of India, the unity and integrity of India? So what they are trying to do is that by peddling this narrative, they hope to split the electorate throughout India to somehow retain relevance and hope to hold on to power in some pockets. This is at the superficial political level, but I think this analysis holds water.
So, like you said, the name still is Indian National Congress, and now I recollect Arun Jaitley having said
there is nothing Indian about the Congress. There is nothing Indian or
and now there is nothing national either.
Either.
So I think this reminds me of Arun Jaitley's statement: a once mainstream national party, even though the national word is now questionable, is now a peripheral player. It is acting as a fringe. The mainstream party has become the fringe, and this is a manifestation of that.
Yes.
So let me go back to since you are studying history constantly and juxtaposing it to the current situation across multiple aspects. If we were to go back, this is the current generation: Rahul Gandhi, Jairam Ramesh, all the DK Suresh. In the current contemporary times, are uttering these statements. But let's say you go back to having Congress having governed, ruled the country for so many decades. Now there are some who would say that the division of states on linguistic lines perhaps also sowed the seeds of what we're seeing across the country at different levels. How can you elaborate on this? How do you see this?
Absolutely, it's a fantastic question. There is no doubt that dividing India along linguistic lines, that is creating states based purely on language, was the single biggest blunder that our leaders did after we got political freedom. I still call it political freedom. India is not really free in the true sense. We are still deeply colonized. But that's a topic for another day. Now, this whole narrative, like I said, United States of South India, federation of different states, things like that. And you also mentioned about how Karnataka was and still is to a great extent a very refined culture state, which did not have this kind of separatist Dravidian nonsense, that took place in Tamil Nadu more than a century ago. When this so-called Dravidian narrative began by E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar, incorrectly known as Periyar, and his Justice Party and their whole gang, remember that the DMK and the Dravidian narrative did not capture power through legitimate means. That road was paved through street violence. So let's keep that in mind. Now, during that period, this street violence and arson, agitation, those tendencies also spread to Karnataka in the same period. And as a result of that, and let's not forget that in the garb of one of the foundations of Dravidianism is anti-Brahminism. It still is. So that also spilled most notably in Andhra, undivided Andhra, along the Nellore region. So when Nellore is on the coast, one straight line will take you to Chennai on that road. So it spilled over to Nellore region in Andhra, and out here it also made some inroads into the old Mysore region. In the what was then known as the Mysore princely state, Mysore Samsthanam. So some of these elements were also inspired out here from Ramaswamy Nayakar and Justice Party. They started something called the Prajamitra Mandali, meaning association of the friends of the people, which eventually became known as Praja Paksha or People's Party. But fortunately for us, for this state, the cultural and political atmosphere of Mysore back then was so strong, was so sturdy, and it had such a tempering impact that it was able to withstand these shocks of separatist and anti-Brahmin agitations, and the Prajapaksha eventually got absorbed into Congress Party of that era, pre-independence. So that saved us, and ever since these separatist tendencies have never come to the surface until now.
So this is again for those who are interested in the genesis and history, and precisely the reason we're having the conversation with somebody like you is to bring these facets out. So there were seeds sowed,
yes,
but they did not sprout.
Yeah, they didn't acquire political power like it did in Tamil Nadu.
Exactly. So that explains it.
That's a better way of.
Yeah, that explains it. So if again going back to the linguistic division of states, again in a historical context, to the extent that I have gathered, it was not necessarily a well thought out, unanimously supported move even within the political framework of that time. There was a resistance to that.
I was just about to address that. Okay. This idea of forming states based on language first began in something called the Nehru Report, which was published by the Congress in 1928. It was sponsored in large part. It was written, produced and directed by a man named Motilal Nehru. So I have to give you a little bit of historical background so that we get a complete picture of it. In pre-independence India, so India included Pakistan, Burma also. Remember, British was ruling Burma also. Pakistan, Bangladesh, and what is today known as India. So that pre-British India, pre-independence India was divided into two distinct parts. One part was known as the British India, which means the geography of India, which came directly under the rule of the British Crown in England. The second part was the 562 or 555 princely states, which formed about more than 40% of undivided India's geography, in which there was a population of about 8 to 9 crores of Indians. Remember that India's population in 1947 was 33 crores or 55 crores or something. So that's a substantial geography and a lot of people. Now, British India and princely states. There was no linguistic divisions. Now, what Nehru Report of 1928 did was that it said, at some point or the other, you guys, you British, will pack your bags and leave. And then you will declare independence. So, what should be the constitution for that independent India, for the post-British India, which all areas should come under, should belong to that India. So, this was essentially the whole crux of the Nehru Report. And in that geography of a post-British India, it excluded these 562 princely states.
Sorry to interject. So this is important. I mean, I'm having trouble absorbing this.
Okay.
So it excluded the princely states.
Yes, it excluded about roughly 35 to 40% of Indian geography. This is what D.V. Gundappa, or fondly known as DVG in Karnataka, he wrote a very scathing rebuttal to this Nehru Report. And he says that, the Congress party, with the Indian National Congress with a capital N, is no less punctilious in excluding the princely states, in treating the princely states as foreign territory.
That's scathing, indeed. Yes. And I think they invited it.
That was the comment. And it was not just DVG. Anybody who cared about the cultural foundations of India, anybody who knew the cultural civilizational continuity of India, they unanimously criticized this Nehru Report. So the genesis for the linguistic division of India is in this Nehru Report of 1928. And that became a reality unfortunately after the British left. So that Nehru Report was the genesis of the linguistic division of states. But you know what is interesting and what is more tragic is that even after independence, nobody really gave a serious thought about dividing India along language. The classic example, there were agitations and stuff going on, especially from in Andhra. There was a leader called Potti Sriramulu. Tragedy, like I said, is that there were some agitations going on based on clamor for states based on language. The first state to do this was undivided Andhra Pradesh. There was a leader named Potti Sriramulu. He began to agitate for a separate Andhra based on language. Telugu speaking regions should have their own state. And he went on a fast unto death. But even before he went on the agitation or somewhere around that, there was a committee formed called the States Reorganization Committee. It came out with its report in 1949 and it strongly recommended against forming new states based on language.
And who formed this committee?
Congress. Government, yeah.
And the report advised against the linguistic division.
Yes. So of course the committee was formed to inquire into the feasibility of forming states based on languages. So it strongly came out against it. And then Potti Sri Ramulu started fasting unto death, and he died. That began riots, widespread rioting and arson in these Telugu-speaking regions. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, whom I fondly refer to as Nawab Nehru, we can do a separate episode on why I call him Nawab Nehru. So he buckled in. He went weak-kneed that, Nehru did not have stomach for a fight. He was basically a bully who got his way through bullying, and his pedigree as a son of Motilal Nehru, the successful barrister, and blah blah blah. So Nehru buckled in, he caved in under pressure and said, okay, we are forming one more committee to look into the reorganization of states, again based on language.
Provoked by the...
Yeah, because Potti Sri Ramulu died. That report, when it came out, it again upheld the findings and the recommendations of the previous committee from 4-5 years back. But then Nehru played dirty, and he arm twisted the members of that committee and said, look, we can't have more riots on our hand, so let's give this separate state to Telugu speaking regions. That is how the state of Andhra Pradesh came into being somewhere in October or November 1956, if I'm not wrong, 55, 56. I forget the year. So that was how, this is a story of the formation of undivided Andhra Pradesh. Now, the moment the Telugu speaking regions got a separate state for themselves, that set a precedent. In the rest of the India, special interest groups agitating for different demands, separate states, the message to them was clear that this is a prime minister, for all his bluster, for all his courage, this is a prime minister who will yield to blackmail, who will yield to violent blackmail. And in a space of a few months after forming Andhra Pradesh, there are widespread riots throughout India, from Punjab. There was no state called Haryana, sir. How many of us know this? Punjab, on that side, extreme north. Punjab, Odisha, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu to hai hi, Maharashtra, Gujarat. Whole of what is today known as large parts of Maharashtra and Gujarat were known as Bombay Presidency.
So, okay, so I think
within a span of less than say a decade, you had these linguistic, India was divided into states based exclusively on language. What it did was that it cut off the civilizational continuity and the cultural cohesion and harmony that had existed for millennia.
So, just stay with this.
So, India is the only country in human history which united the country by dividing them along linguistic lines.
No, so again, this is these revelations establish clearly that the fissiparous tendencies that are widely prevalent in spite of the division of linguistic lines, the seeds were sowed because of weak leadership at some point in time back then, in starting with Andhra,
yes,
by caving in, like you said.
Yeah.
But more importantly, the whole unification that Sardar Patel carried out was actually undone by this move by Nehru.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, there are no two ways about that. So it's look, social harmony, cultural and civilizational indivisibility, its continuity. How are they maintained? For so many, for a minimum of 2000 years. If you look at all our languages, which are so-called vernacular or regional languages. I call them all as Bharatiya Bhasha. They go way back to about minimum 2000 years. With Prakrit, Pali, Apabhramsha, all these, they have a history of minimum 2000 or 2500 years. We never had a problem for so long.
So as much as one would not like to, even if one goes by the manufactured rants from, say, the Congress Party about invoking Nehru. I mean, all roads do lead to Nehru, unfortunately, for roots of a lot of ills that lie before the country today. Like you just revealed.
Absolutely.
So, how does one place this in the sense when there is historical evidence of spiritual and civilizational continuity having been maintained for centuries, and by princely states who did not even have access to modern governance mechanism which Nehru and the subsequent governments had, they could have just continued with the model instead of trying to impose this artificial linguistic division. So
it called for strong leadership, decisive leadership, which unfortunately, by his character, Sitaram Goel gives perhaps the best assessment of Nehru. He says that Nehru was a person who licked the boot which kicked him.
Indeed. I mean, well said and scathing, but nevertheless true.
It's true.
I mean, there's no other way to look at it.
It is true. Look at the people Nehru, adored and worshipped. Stalin, Lenin. These were his Mao, all monsters and genocidal maniacs. He regarded them as great leaders and statesmen and unifiers.
So again, with every revelation or historical insight that you're providing, so in this case, the eminent Nehru, clearly he himself was not rooted in India's civilization and spiritual
we will do a
ethos.
separate thing on Nehru, but just to address your limited question, show me one thing from Nehru's childhood till his death. Show me one thing that was truly Indian in Nehru. He was born to privilege. All of us know. I mean, I still remember reading in my textbooks about how Nehru's privilege was celebrated and glorified as some kind of a virtue. His dad used to send his suits all the way to Bond Street in England to get them washed and ironed. Remember, he used to send them on steamers and ships. This was the absolute privilege and luxury and entitlement that Nehru lived in. Have you been to Allahabad and seen Anand Bhavan?
No, I haven't.
Just go. It will be one of the greatest revelations knowing what we know now. And Anand Bhavan is like a mini township within itself. Now this man, there was nothing Indian in him for the whole culture within his household and Motilal Nehru's extended social circle and acquaintances. It was the Pakka Nawabi culture of Allahabad, one of the hubs of this Mughal culture. That is one. Number two, from his dressing, he never wore any dhoti or anything that had any bearing of nativity. It was all the Persian sherwani, that type of topi, this kind of thing. Two, diet. Non-vegetarian for a Kashmiri Pandit. The women folk of Nehru family, they were pious Kashmiri Brahmins. So according to one account, beef also used to be cooked in the Nehru kitchen. And once Jawaharlal, he entered public life. His education, where did it happen? It didn't happen in any school in India. His boyhood education, he had English and French governesses. Which Indian language, including Hindi, did he know inside out? None.
So like you said, I think Nehru warrants an independent conversation.
It does. So let's come back to...
Yeah. Huh. So would it be a reasonably accurate surmise to say that the deracination of Congress that we're seeing today, its origins lie in Nehru because he himself had no roots in India's civilization and
yes, in
culture.
a way, yes. Not just in Nehru, but the class of people which eventually became powerful within the Congress party were all deracinated, including Nehru.
So that's, yeah.
He was on the topmost layer. So that class assumed tremendous power disproportionate to its sheer numbers. So that is the tragedy of India. There were, by the time Nehru was born, the Macaulay system of education had already taken deep roots. If I'm not mistaken, he was born in 1889, Nehru. If I'm not mistaken, or no, maybe before that. So it had taken 2 generations of Indians had already undergone this Macaulay education, but by virtue of Nehru being born in that elite circle, he treated the rest of India like how the British and the Mughals used to treat that class of Indians, the proverbial unwashed masses. The Nawabi and the Mughal culture called them as rice-eating people of Hind, or the word Hindi. There's a word Hindi, it has a specific meaning. It is not language. It means kafir.
Very telling.
Okay. So Hindi, rice-eating Hindi, and what is that? Gobar Parast. So this is how the Mughals and the Nawabi culture looked at the unwashed masses of this country, and this was pretty much the same attitude that Nehru had. And then under the British rule, bloody Indians, dogs and Indians not allowed. Remember that?
Yes, of course.
So Nehru had pretty much the same. His favorite word of abuse for Indians was Namukkul and Kamina.
Again, the origins go back to the Nawabi marination, so to speak.
Marination. That's a good choice. Good word. Anyway, so this coming back to this linguistic state. So this was a man with great inferiority complex. If he can call himself proudly as the last brown Englishman or something. Remember, he uttered these words when as Prime Minister. So he had deep-seated complexes which he thrust upon the rest of us, unfortunately. And look, any time things got heated up, Nehru would not know how to handle it. He was not a problem solver, he was a problem creator. And this is the biggest blunder. Dividing India along linguistic lines was the biggest blunder that he, and it's unfair to single him out, but he, along with some others in the top leadership of the Congress, were responsible for creating this blunder. Number 2 is another factor, a related factor that directly and indirectly contributed to dividing India along linguistic lines. But in this case, it was not strictly restricted to dividing India along linguistic lines. So this was a thesis that was first propounded, scripted and published as a monograph by a top communist leader of that time named Gangadhar Adhikari. It is called Pakistan and National Unity. That is the name of the thesis. So the origin of this thesis, or rather the motive factor for writing this thesis, was to support the Muslim League's demand for a separate Islamic nation called Pakistan. So how do you justify, remember the timeline, 1943-44, that is when it was published. So how do you justify a separate nation based on religion without making the Muslim community look bad? Because they were the guys who propounded it, from the Aligarh school, from the Deoband school, and all these Allama Iqbal and Syed Ahmad Khan, all those luminaries. How do you justify a separate Pakistan, a separate country, to carve out a separate country purely, exclusively on the basis of religion, without making the Muslims look bad? You propound a thesis, basically saying that there is nothing called a united India. See where it leads to? Rahul Gandhi again, Federation of whatever states, United States of South India, separate South Indian nation. See the links now?
No, absolutely. I think
And one point in, so to justify Pakistan, you basically float a balloon which says, on absolutely no basis in history or lived experience, to say that India was never a united country, but only a collection of mutually hostile states which have different, which are diverse or which are different countries. So Adhikari says that, look, it doesn't matter on what basis that India is divided, because India was never one. So if the Lingais ask for a separate country, call it Lingaitstan. He gives a huge list of about 28 separate such countries. Balochistan separate country, Punjab separate country, Tamil Nadu separate country, Madurai separate country. Like I said, Lingayat separate country, Maharashtra separate country, Vidarbha separate country. So it doesn't matter on what basis that you divide India, you have to divide India. That was the bottom line.
no. So therefore, I mean, what we started with was the trying to understand whether this is an off-the-cuff intemperate statement from Karnataka by an elected representative. So clearly, with the string that you have shared over the last 30 minutes or so, so there was never a unified view of India ever, and that runs in the DNA of the party, unbroken since that time.
Yes.
One.
Yes.
Two, the deracination also therefore never saw this as a civilizational continuum. And therefore for them it is par for the course.
The deracinated class doesn't even recognize that India is a civilization, sir.
So therefore such statements are par for the course. I mean, it does not shock them at all, because it's a natural emanation of...
Congress is a mothership of separatism.
So exactly. So it was not an intemperate of the
It is a granddaddy of divisiveness.
So and now propelled by their existential crisis, this is the only card they somehow seem to know how to play.
So their real colors are coming out. Sir, very simple. After 1947, Congress had an uninterrupted stint at power for 45 years. Uninterrupted. And later, with some coalition governments, another, all in all, about 60 years they've had, more than half a century. So as long as they were in power, why didn't this narrative emerge? It might surprise you when I say this. By the time the DMK was firmly in power, it pretty much gave up their pipe dream of having a separate Tamil nation. So as long as the Congress was in power, and it was not seriously challenged, or rather it didn't have powerful enough challengers, it didn't have a need for an overt separatist agenda that we are seeing. But on a parallel track, or rather along the same lines, what is its record of preserving India's unity and integrity during the same period in which it enjoyed this uninterrupted power? One, linguistic division of states. Two, divide people along caste lines. On the one hand, you say casteless society, but come election time, on what plank do you seek votes? Casteist planks. Two, then if that is not enough, you have this, what is it called? Separatism, Kashmir, Punjab. So who created these things?
Clearly, the roots, all roots lead to...
And why will there be an explosion in terror attacks the moment Congress comes to power? Under which government, successive governments, did India face the maximum number of terror attacks? Between 2004 and 2014, when the UPA was in power, led by the Congress party, there was an estimated one terror attack every 6 weeks.
We've lived through these. When we were working, we lived through these.
So terrorism, when was the last time you heard terrorism?
We haven't had a single episode of 2014. Absolutely.
Like I said, the mothership of separatism. And even under successive Congress regimes, under whose prime ministership did these separatist tendencies or incidents occur the most? The same Sikh separatism, not Sikh separatism, but one strain of this Khalistani terror outfits. Under the same Congress regime, it was dismantled. By whom? By which Prime Minister? Narasimha Rao.
So it's not the party, it's the intent and the will of the person.
It is a person, it is a family, it is a dynasty. So you see all the links of, all the historical precedents, all the factors that are at play, behind D.K. Suresh's so-called intemperate statement. It will be too much on our part to expect him to know the history of his own party at this depth. He's been given a script like many others who share, his party's ideology or the lack of it. It is too much of us to expect them to know all this. But they've been given a script and they're adhering to it. Tomorrow the script might change for the worse or for the better. He'll follow the same thing. Like how Rahul Gandhi becomes a seasonal Brahmin.
So, how do you see this trajectory of Fitzparius tendencies, secessionist voices over the years ahead? Would it be a function of their political marginalization? Let's say, hypothetically, they come back to power at some point in time. Then these tendencies will be brushed under the carpet because they are not politically expedient. Or do you see them continuing and probably escalating?
Yes and no. Neither of us are, soothsayers, or we don't have clairvoyance to predict the future. We are not astrologers also. What I can say, going by past experience, by history, is that God forbid these forces come to power again. Because if that happens, 10 years is a long time for any party to be out of power at the center. All right? And the millions that all these Breaking India forces, their sponsors and their helpers are pumping in, at some point of time they will need a ROI. If at all they come to power, I repeat, God forbid they won't. If that happens, they will start, all these, their aides, their handlers, they will start asking their pound of flesh. That pound of flesh can be different states of India. It can be the unity and integrity of India. I am not kidding. We were this close from losing Punjab to Pakistan. Same thing with Kashmir. It's a scary prospect, but political expediency might also make them brush these things under the carpet. To which I will say, let's not forget what happened during the 10-year term of UPA 1 and UPA 2. The amount of cultural subversion and institutional subversion at all levels that happened in that decade did not happen since the dawn of Hindu civilization, since the dawn of the Indian civilization. That much of damage they've done in those 10 years. One NGO, I think, must be either Oxfam or Amnesty. I think Amnesty. They had been trying to make serious inroads into India from the 1970s. You can look at the British parliamentary debates, on precisely this issue. Indira Gandhi blocked it, thankfully. But they got a free run. That UPA decade was a regime of NGOs. What do you mean having something called a National Advisory Council, which is not approved by the parliament? No act is passed. It is not sanctioned by the constitution. It has no precedent. It had the power to overrule the prime minister of the country.
And staffed with people of dubious antecedents.
Totally. With links to terror outfits. Who is this alleged economist, Jean Dries or something?
Correct.
He's a foreign national. I mean, you don't do basic due diligence, background check. He had greater power than the Indian Prime Minister. So this is what I meant when I said, they will want their pound of flesh.
So I think this again calls for a standalone conversation on the damage during the UPA era.
Definitely.
So I think that needs to be brought out.
That era, that dark decade has been severely understudied. If it has enough material for a proper scholarly academic research, and if the full findings are published with due academic rigor, I estimate the findings will take no less than 5,000 pages.
So I think it's people like you and a few others who can perhaps lead the charge on this. But I think it is important to bring out, put the spotlight on that
Yes,
tenure.
yes,
So let's keep that in the pipeline. What started off as a conversation with Karnataka being an aberration, and thanks to a statement, or no thanks to a statement made by a Congress elected MP. Clearly, the history, the deracination, the antecedents effectively establish that it runs in the DNA. It doesn't matter which generation, which year. It'll keep perpetuating itself. The degrees would vary depending on the political climate of that day or that time, and it always has to be borne in mind when dealing with such forces in the country. For this government and to all the right-thinking citizens of this country, I think these historical insights are vital, because I think generations have gone without knowing or understanding the reference to the Nehru Report or the Adhikari Report having been overruled in spite of having given the right funding. So I think this has been absolutely fascinating, and actually more than fascinating, extremely worrying. And I think thank you for bringing it to light in this conversation. So with that, I think let's conclude the first Dharma Conversation of 2024. So I think it calls for a profuse thank you again, Sandeep, for bringing all these historical aspects to light. And I think it's important that the coming generations and the current generations who either have no knowledge, unfortunately, or have not witnessed these happening in their lifetime, know about these. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to spread knowledge about the history and antecedents of what we're seeing acutely surface today. So we would urge you and call upon you to like, share and subscribe to the Dharma Dispatch channel. Thank you everyone for your time and listening to this conversation.